What's up, y'all? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about what it feels like when gender dysphoria results in a sense of cognitive dissonance. In my last video, I talked about some of the nuances around passing for trans folks, including the difference between passing versus not failing, which for me means no longer being misgendered, even if I'm not always seen as my actual gender either. If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend checking it out, because it sort of lays the foundation for this one, where I'm going to be talking about how not failing is one of my transition goals, and how the nature of my gender dysphoria has shifted over time in pursuit of that goal. So first things first, what is gender dysphoria? It's the distress or discomfort you feel as a result of a mismatch between the gender you actually are versus the one you were assigned at birth, or a mismatch between your gender and how it's perceived. Gender dysphoria can be physical, related to your body's sex-based characteristics. It can be social, related to how other people treat you according to your gender. And it can manifest in different ways, such as pain, where being reminded about your assigned gender hurts a lot. Whether those reminders come from others, like when people call you the wrong pronouns, or from yourself, like when you hear the sound of your own voice, every single one of them feels like a knife. Especially when they pile up, then it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Depersonalization, or feeling disconnected from yourself. That might look like not recognizing yourself in the mirror or in photos, or heavily disassociating, especially during gendered social interactions. So instead of feeling hurt, you might just feel a sense of numbness or detachment. Cognitive dissonance, a sharp contrast between how you see yourself and how others see you. It can be difficult to reconcile those two conflicting perspectives of yourself in your head, and that can really mess with your confidence and your trust in who you are. That manifestation of gender dysphoria as cognitive dissonance is what I'm going to focus on in this video, because I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about it, and I want to see if anyone else has experienced gender dysphoria in this way. Just to set the scene a little, I'm a transmasculine, non-binary person, and I've been socially transitioning for almost 8 years and medically transitioning for a little over 2.5. Before I started testosterone, back when my transition was all social, most of my dysphoria manifested as pain. But once I got past my first year on T and started my second, the nature of my dysphoria changed. It became noticeably less painful, which was awesome. That was exactly what I had been hoping for. But it didn't go away, it just started manifesting as cognitive dissonance instead. So now I really want to dive into what that feels like and how it affects me and what it means for my transition goals. And I guess I'll start off by saying that as of right now, I have no idea how most other people perceive my gender. I've heard a lot of other trans people talk about how the further they get into their transition and the longer they're on hormones, the less often they get misgendered. But for me, it's still an absolute crapshoot. There hasn't been any kind of steady trajectory in the right direction, and I think that's where my cognitive dissonance comes from. Because I can see myself getting more masculine every day. Yes, it's very slow and gradual, but I'm still moving forward along that more masculine path. And the further I go down that path, the more I think my brain struggles to understand why I haven't seen a steady decline in misgendering following suit. Right after I hit 1 year on T, I actually experienced an uptick in misgendering, even to the point where I was getting misgendered more regularly than I used to pre-T, and I could not for the life of me figure out why. What was making more people call me she or miss or ma'am when I looked and sounded like this? What's up, y'all? It's GC Kinsey. Than when I looked and sounded like this.
Hey, what's up? It's GC Kinsey.
It just didn't make any sense. My voice was getting deeper, my neck was getting thicker, my upper arms were getting bigger, my jawline and hairline were both squaring up, I was growing a dirt stash on my upper lip. Like, these changes were happening, I wasn't making them up. And thank goodness I was documenting them with photos and videos and audio recordings, or else that uptick in misgendering might have made me think I was making them up. So yeah, that's when my dysphoria really shifted from pain to cognitive dissonance. Going to the store and getting called ma'am by the cashier didn't feel like a punch to the face anymore. It felt like, oh my god, am I losing my mind? I can see a dude in the mirror and hear a tenor voice coming out of my own mouth, so what is happening? Especially since I was getting misgendered with such confidence too, like zero hesitation, no stopping and trying to figure out what to call me, just going straight to ma'am with 100% certainty they were right. And the cognitive dissonance from that really started to mess with my head. I wanted to find a way to make it stop, so naturally I started trying to figure out why it was happening. I started asking myself things like, are people really not noticing any of the effects of tea even after more than a year? Or are they noticing but the changes still aren't enough because I'm still in that awkward in-between stage of puberty? Are people assuming I'm a woman with a hormone imbalance rather than a transmasc person on tea, so they're overcompensating to make me feel better about it, and that's why I'm getting misgendered more often? Do I just have to keep being patient and waiting for more of the changes to kick in? And if I'm already doing everything I can with hormones, is there anything else I can be doing in the meantime? And that got me reevaluating other aspects of my gender expression too, and making some adjustments, which of course my draggy, flamboyant, non-binary gay ass didn't enjoy because it felt like I was purposefully dulling my shine. But that uptick in misgendering and the cognitive dissonance that followed was making me feel like my transition was going backwards instead of forwards. Plus, I knew these adjustments would just be temporary until I got on the other side of puberty. So, I got progressively shorter haircuts with more masculine shaping and layering, even though I prefer being a dude with longer hair. I started wearing t-shirts and track pants to run errands instead of my gay little bike shorts and tank tops. And if I knew I was gonna have to talk to somebody, then I dressed even more intentionally masculine with button downs and cargo pants. Also, if I knew I'd have to talk to someone, I made sure my eyebrow arches were filled in, even though that meant it took more time to get ready. And I got very careful about when and where I put on makeup and nail polish and certain kinds of jewelry, because I knew that would just give people more ammo to misgender me with, even though I feel the most masculine when I'm all glammed up like this. So I tried these adjustments all throughout my second year on T and beyond, hoping that I could spot some sort of pattern or pinpoint what it was that kept getting me misgendered. And sadly, nothing. There is still no clear-cut answer. For a while, I thought it must be the brows because I actually went through a 6-month period where the only times I got misgendered were when my arches weren't filled in. So I was like, that's it, that's the thing. Until suddenly, out of the blue, I got misgendered 3 different times in the same week, all when I had my arches filled in. So, nope, right back at square one. As of now, at a little over 2.5 years on T, I'm still in that awkward in-between phase of puberty, but way further along than I was at 1 year on T, and yet somehow it's still anybody's guess as to how I'll get gendered. I would estimate that about 60 to 70% of the time, I don't get gendered at all, not in the sense of someone taking a long pause trying to figure out what I am and then giving up, more like they're just not gendering anybody. They're opting to say things like, "How are you?" or "Have a good day," without tacking on ma'am or sir at the end, which, by the way, is what I wish everyone would do. Why guess someone's gender when there's a chance you could get it wrong? And that's the real kicker for me. When I do get gendered, I almost always get misgendered. Like, easily 90% of the time, I'll get called ma'am instead of sir. The times I do get gendered correctly are so few and far between that I actually have a series of short-form videos about them. So that leaves me in kind of a weird place where technically I don't get misgendered most of the time because I don't get gendered period most of the time, but because of how likely I know it is to happen, it still feels like I get misgendered a lot. And I still go through these weird cycles where I'll go a long stretch of time without getting misgendered, or the misgendering finally starts tapering off. I start to think things are actually getting better, and then I get hit with another uptick in misgendering that leaves me sitting there scratching my head. Sometimes I even get whiplash from the different ways that my gender is perceived. I recently had a friend ask me, "So with the shorter hair and the deeper voice, everyone just sees you as a dude now, right?" Only to get misgendered twice the very next day. So, yeah, I fucking wish. I called in a takeout order the other day where the person on the phone called me sir, but then when I went in the restaurant to pick it up, the person behind the counter called me ma'am. And for all I know, they were the same person, which literally, what the f***? And even here on YouTube, sometimes I'll get one comment that says, I would have thought you were a cis dude if you hadn't said you were trans, and another one that says, you're not even close to looking or sounding like a man and you never will be, and another one that says, wow, how did you achieve such a perfectly balanced level of androgyny? All on the same video, which is wild. And I know YouTube is very different from real life because on here I talk about being trans and everyone knows I'm trans from the jump, whereas out in public they don't. So they're not misgendering me to be trolls the way people sometimes do on my videos. But even so, that range of perceptions of my gender in YouTube comments on the same video is enough to leave my brain stewing in cognitive dissonance soup sometimes. In my previous video, I talked about the nuances around passing versus not failing and how passing isn't one of my transition goals. Because passing as what? A cis man? A trans man? Either way, a binary man isn't who I am, but passing as a transmasc NB in such a binary-centric world isn't exactly feasible either. But not failing, not getting misgendered anymore, that is one of my transition goals, and it's really important to me both for dysphoria reasons and safety reasons. In the other video, I focused more on safety reasons, but in this one, now that I've shared what my dysphoria feels like and how it's changed throughout my time on testosterone, I hope you can understand why I just want to reach that point where I no longer have to worry about being called she or miss or ma'am ever again. Whether it's because people think I'm a man or an NB, or they're just like, heck if I know, I don't care as long as they're not like, that's definitely a chick. Because unless that stops happening, I don't think this dysphoria in the form of cognitive dissonance will ever go away. I mean, I've been feeling this type of dysphoria for the last year and a half or so, and it hasn't gone anywhere, so I don't know, I can only hope I'm not stuck with it forever. But I want to wrap up by sharing 6 things I do to make it easier while I am stuck with it in the meantime. 1. I remind myself that feeling dysphoria as cognitive dissonance is way easier than feeling it as pain. I'll take mind-boggling confusion over hurt any day. And yes, dysphoria of any kind sucks, but even if I'm stuck with this kind, at least I'm way better off than where I started. 2. I reassure myself that when I get misgendered, it's not my fault. I've literally done everything I can to get my appearance to convey this is not a woman. So if all I can do now is keep giving testosterone more time to do its thing, then that's that. 3. I ground myself in reality by listening to the voice recordings I've made and looking at the photos and videos I've taken at different stages throughout my transition. That way when my brain starts going down that spiral of, oh my god, I just got misgendered again, the testosterone isn't doing anything at all, I can stop that in its tracks with hard evidence that the T is working and that I've come a long way. 4. I regulate myself by boosting gender euphoria, which helps to offset gender dysphoria. This strategy was really helpful back when my dysphoria manifested more as pain and I needed a way to mitigate it. And it also works really well now for fighting off that cognitive dissonance. Singing, getting dressed up in a fancy suit, or even just sitting around playing with my facial hair are all ways that I can boost gender euphoria. 5. I reward myself for dealing with something as tough as dysphoria by giving myself little treats. It could be going to an anime convention, watching a figure skating competition, having a spontaneous techno dance party in my living room, or even just relaxing in the bathtub with a book and a mug of hot tea. I like to mix it up for variety, but regardless, I am all about that treat yourself life. And 6, I surround myself with supportive friends and chosen family. Having that support system is so important because I know I can count on them to help me feel better whenever the dysphoria is really getting to me. And to reinforce the fact that just because I get misgendered sometimes doesn't mean all the changes I've been going through during my transition are all in my head. And on that note, now is where I want to turn the conversation over to you. If you experience gender dysphoria, has it ever manifested as cognitive dissonance for you, and if so, what has that been like? If there's a big discrepancy between your gender and how others see it, how do you manage your feelings about that? If that discrepancy still persists even after you've made significant changes to your gender expression, have you been able to figure out why and do something about it, or do you think it's just luck of the draw? And whether you deal with gender dysphoria as cognitive dissonance or not, what questions do you have about all this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I'm GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. I've got more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person, along with cosplay music videos, cosplay tutorials, a bunch of cool resources for singers about voice changes on testosterone, and more right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope your day is full of gender euphoria, and I will see you on the next one.